All right, what's up? What's up? It's the Maddie Daddy. We are here at the Fantasy Affair Quick Hitters, your quick hitters. That's player values, that's rankings, and that's kind of what you can expect for in trade value moving forward. But it's not just me tonight. Like always, I got a banging guest, baby. I got Malcolm McMillan, McLateral from The Lateral, one of the best podcasts. Has Herms over there, just two grinders. Who I just can't wait to talk to tonight. What's going on, my man?
It's your boy McLateral. What's going on?
Woo! All up in it tonight, my man. We're talking. I said, what are we doing here, McLateral? Who are we going after?
Well, we're going to be talking about Tyler Boyd, possibly one of the most confusing, frustrating, or valuable people you could be looking at in fantasy, particularly in redraft this year. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
Well, let's bring them back. Let's rewind the tape a little bit, man. We had 2 years of a wide receiver 2 finish. And last year was kind of a letdown, but it had its hope with Burrow and with all these other shades of greatness. So let's go rewind it back to last year. What went wrong?
So what went wrong is Joe Burrow tore his ACL. I mean, really, when you look at the tape, it comes down to borderline that. I'm going to give you two splits. One is for Joe Burrow. One is for T. Higgins. Through 8 weeks, not Joe Burrow, I'm sorry, Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins. Through 8 weeks, Tyler Boyd was wide receiver 8 in PPR. T. Higgins was wide receiver 23. At the end of week 16, Tyler Boyd was wide receiver 28 and Higgins was wide receiver 24. It's a huge difference. We have 20 spot drop for Boyd and a 1 spot drop for Higgins. So what happens during that time? Well, against the Washington football team, Burrow blows out his ACL. And that's like pretty much it. Like Burrow and Boyd had a connection last year. Now, that's going to be complicated this year because of some people that are coming in. We can get to that in a minute. But for the tape we do have, for the stats we do have, Burrow threw an average of 40.4 attempts per game. And that, again, includes a game where he blew out his knee partway through. So the number theoretically could have been even higher. It's not a great defense. It's not a great O-line. In theory, that will get better this year. But even then, it's definitely going to be an offense that has to pass the ball a ton. And 8.7 of those targets per game went to Tyler Boyd last year.
So that's a healthy target share.
And a clear connection.
Right. And if you have not the greatest O-line, you're going to have to check down a little more than you would with a stellar O-line. This Bengals team kind of reminds me of the Cowboys of the AFC. Just loaded with weapons, no defense. O-line's kind of patchwork. But let's talk about those weapons, man, because first round, LSU's finest, Ja'Marr Chase. We got a new-look Bengals offense. Burrow's supposed to be ready week 1. You always have the upside of Mixon, but Boyd, Chase, Higgins. And then, Drew Sample.
Well, what you say, Drew Sample. I think you're also forgetting, CJ Uzomah. CJ Uzomah is getting
still there.
He's getting paid $5 million to still be there.
That's crazy.
Seriously, his base salary is $4.7 million next year. He's got a prorated bonus of around $1 million. His cap savings is $5 million. So you think, oh, maybe a candidate to get cut, save some space. His dead money is over $1 million. Only just, but that's still like a chunk of change. I don't think they're going to just give that up, especially since they can let the guy go the next year. I don't think the Bengals are particularly cap tight, so I would expect CJ Uzomah to still be a part of that offense and one that catches the ball. Though I'm not particularly worried about the tight end siphoning too much work unless for some reason it's matchup dependent. So we saw that one game against Cleveland last year, I think, where the tight ends just went off because Cleveland didn't cover them. But aside from that, I would worry about Ja'Marr Chase. Ja'Marr Chase was brought in very specifically by Joe Burrow, not by the head coach, not by the general manager, not by the owner, literally by the quarterback, the guy who's going to throw the ball. And so
let's talk about, improved offensive line, healthy Joe Mixon. This is a pass-heavy team, hopefully.
Yes,
So
I'd expect that to remain the same.
what are your expectations? Because you kind of saw Higgins and Boyd flip flop as the season went on, and now we're adding Chase to this trio. Do you think Burrow will still lock on to Boyd as like his go-to, or do you see it just being a Chase, Higgins, and Boyd's just picking up the scraps?
So I'm particularly worried about T. Higgins. I think Burrow is going to lock onto Jamar Chase as his number one target. I think that's a given. If you're planning for anything other than that, I would argue that you're potentially delusional. I don't use that term lightly, but again, this is the guy who was literally handpicked with a top 5 pick to come in and be the wide receiver one. We have to really be realistic there. I still think that the ball gets spread around a bit. I still think, honestly, you probably see wide receiver 2 performances rather than wide receiver 1 performances from any of these guys, just in terms of fantasy numbers rather than the depth chart specifically. I think the Cowboys you mentioned earlier is an example of that, where it's like the Cowboys, they produce some high-end wide receiver 2s to middling wide receiver 2s to lower-end wide receiver 2s, but rarely that wide receiver 1. So projections for him, talking like 85 receptions, 950 yards, 5 touchdowns. I think it's about accurate. It's weird. You think like Boyd over the middle, like kind of a safety blanket type guy. You'd think maybe he would be looked at in the end zone more, but actually his touchdown totals last year weren't amazing. Like he had, I think 4 all season, I think 3 with Burrow, like 3 out of 13 of Burrow's touchdowns were going there. So like, I think it'll be better than 5, but like we shouldn't expect anything astronomical there. I think his yardage is actually better than expected. And if it's really high powered offense, we could see him even potentially crack 1,000 yards, which again, isn't too far. So people are thinking that like, I think a top 25 finish feels reasonable for Tyler.
Well, and that's the thing. He's going like at the 36 range, like maybe later than that.
You'd be thinking that, but it's interesting. So right now in ADP per fantasy football calculator, which again, it's super early and it's very limited sample sizes, but he's actually 71st overall in wide receiver 29, which isn't a great value.
So last year, what he finished.
Last year, he actually was picked lower. Last year, he was 78th overall.
What?
A wide receiver 32 per Fantasy Pros, and then 79th overall, and wide receiver 33 per fantasy football calculator.
Oh my gosh.
Again, I fully expect his ADP to go down. We have a lot of time. Jamar Chase hype is going to get very real. There are still some T. Higgins truthers out there. You know, now might not be necessarily the time to buy on Boyd. I think before the draft was really the time you could get someone to panic sell on him.
Well, now that's the question though, because we've seen last year's production. So everybody's kind of worried about Chase. They're worried about Burrow. So let's talk trades, my man. Let's talk his value and what you're willing to give up, what you're willing to trade him for. We got Boyd. We got Cooks, Terrence Marshall, man. This is a high-end 201, 203 rookie pick this year for a guy who's going to Carolina. We have Cooks, who is the alpha in Houston, but a lot of question marks. Out of these 3, who are you taking?
So I love Terrace Marshall. I really love Terrace Marshall. So Higgins crushed it. Is he saying that like Higgins crushed it last year? Because
I think so. I'm not sure.
Again, I just threw out in PPR, he was wide receiver 23. That's objectively not crushing it. That's good. And he had a good second stretch of the season without the starting quarterback that he's going to have this year. I think we really have to temper expectations that while Higgins is a good wide receiver, I do like the talent. I think he has potential. And I think once Boyd maybe leaves that, his value is crushed. Yeah.
Okay, we got you, Nathan.
Yes. So I would not be shocked if T. Higgins is the wide receiver 3 on this depth chart and in fantasy, like when the year is said and done. Even though, again, I like the player. This is like not an anti-T. Higgins as a football player thing. This is like literally what mouths are going to get fed in that offense. But Terrace Marshall Jr., he's got a really great landing spot. He's got a coach that's going to want to feed him the ball. Like, I think the wide receiver 2 role in that offense kind of fluctuates. I think we kind of saw that last year with Curtis Samuel, Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore. Like, they're going to throw the ball to whoever's open, and they're going to throw the ball plenty. And I think he's a very versatile wide receiver. So I actually, if I can get him instead of Tyler Boyd, I would love that.
All right.
Brandon Cooks is a tough one. Let me be clear. Brandon Cooks with Deshaun Watson as his quarterback is going to finish the highest of these 3. I can almost lock that in. Deshaun's an elite quarterback, even if he may or may not be an elite person. Time will tell on that. But Brandon Cooks has always done what's asked of him. So I would love Brandon Cooks in redraft if I know Deshaun's going to be there. In Dynasty, I'm probably going to stay away for now and be okay with it if he hits it off because Deshaun ends up being the quarterback. I'm willing to miss out on that personally.
All right, so what I've taken from our quick hitters tonight, if you're trading Tyler Boyd, you want to reach into that 201 range. You want a locked and loaded rookie that has a lot of upside, like a Marshall, like a Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore, somebody like that.
I would love those guys, except for Rondale.
And I have a lot of Rondale. So, and then as far as ranking goes, we're going to see some wide receiver 2 weeks. We might see a couple wide receiver 3 weeks, but he is the slot receiver, and a wide receiver 2 finish is likely.
Yeah, and I would say even from a fantasy perspective, you may even see the odd wide receiver 1 week just because of how high-powered that offense is. And if he's open, Burrow's not going to be afraid to target him, but he will never be the wide receiver 1 on the depth chart with Jamar Chase there.
Not the alpha, but kind of like a Gallup. A great role player, has his weeks. Malcolm?
He'll be great.
You're great. Where do they find you, baby? The Lateral, Lateral FF? What else we got, baby?
Yeah, so it's your boy McLateral, a.k.a. McLateral FF on the Twitter. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me at thelateralff.com where we post our written content. This week, I'm actually going to be on the Bacon Games podcast tomorrow night, doing some Niners preview. A little more football focused than fantasy focused. Should be a fun time with my boy Jesse, a fellow contributor over at The Lateral, but also does his own thing over at Bacon Games. And then on Thursday, I got a couple great guests for the Lateral Weekly Variety Hour-ish. I've got Chris Robin coming in. And I've got, I want to say, he's going to hate me for this, but Cody from Real Deal Fantasy. So 2 great guests. Can't wait for it. And again, happy to have been here. You've been a great host. This is awesome.
Pow, pow, pow. You killed it, my man. Till next week, this is the Maddie Daddy. This is your quick hitters. Just gave you your fix.